president who will close our southern border today. We need Donald Trump.
Hello Homo sapiens and welcome back to Ketchup 10, the political series where I say the most batshit insane stuff and say the most controversial opinions that no human should say. Today we're going to talk about 10 topics ranging from who Trump's vice president will be to Kristi Noem to just the controversial shit that's happened this month. So without further ado, let's just begin. The first thing I want to talk about is Trump's vice president. Trump is most likely already deciding on his vice president for the 2024 election. Trump confirmed this because he reposted an image by Benny Johnson and he reposted it on Truth Social. And this image, in the image you can see there's about like 10 or 12 people that have a chance at being Trump's vice president. Trump is standing on stage with, a few fellows, right? You have Vivek on stage, Tim Scott is on stage, you have the Speaker of the House, I forgot his name because he's so relevant, Mike Johnson, he's there. Tulsi Gabbard is not on stage. A lot of people thought that she could have been the next pick, but she's not on stage. Knowing Trump, he's probably gonna pick someone who is less talkative, less relevant, because last time he picked Mike Pence, right? Mike Pence was, I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but he was pretty irrelevant, right? He didn't speak a lot. He was very quiet, which allowed Trump to speak more, allowed him to, be the face of the country, right? Not have someone else be the face of the country with him. If Trump were to pick a vice president, he would not pick someone like Vivek. Vivek, he has his own personality. He has his own cult following. Mike Johnson could be a pick, but no one likes Mike Johnson. If he picked him, he would probably lose the race, even lose conservative voters. Dr. Ben Carson isn't on stage, so he isn't going to be picked. We'll talk about the rest of this later. In the end of the show, I'll tell you my personal pick, who I personally think from all of these people is going to be the vice president of Trump. Biden just really hates gas cars. So I saw this a month ago, right? The Biden administration was creating new regulations for vehicles. He was trying to convince companies to produce more hybrids and electric vehicles. So he wants to, in the 2027 model year, he wants to force car makers to report average emissions of their vehicles. And if they don't match his specific requirements, they'll need to pay fines in the billions. I just hate this entire crowd that's like pro-electric and shit, because technically speaking, EVs are not more efficient for the environment. The first thing is that people in Africa have to mine the lithium that they use to make the batteries, and batteries can only survive for a very specific time frame. After about 10 to 15 years, a battery is gone, done for, no more use for it. While a normal gas car, it can survive, up to 25 years. If you have like a fucking Toyota, it can basically live 40 years, right? Toyotas and Hondas. It's not efficient to have an EV if it can live so little compared to its competitors. Also, right, battery destruction. They obviously have to get rid of the battery somehow. So what they do is they take them to these plants, landfills in Mexico, and they just burn them, right? Which releases even more CO2. So in the total lifespan, right, of a gas car compared to an EV, which one do you think is going to make more CO2? So this ban from the federal government will result in the slow elimination of gas cars, and it'll force people to drive either electrics, plug-ins, hybrids, or hydrogen vehicles. Hydrogen cars specifically, we don't have the infrastructure for, and there are basically only two brands that still make hydrogen cars. You have the Hyundai Nexo and the Toyota Mirai. And hydrogen plants, hydrogen charging stations, or whatever you want to call it, right? Hydrogen pumps are only available mostly in California, in that region, right? If you live near LA, you can probably live with a hydrogen car. But if you want to drive further, drive out of state, you're basically fucked. Kristi Noem is the governor of South Dakota. South Dakota being one of the most irrelevant states. Besides, Wyoming, that's the most irrelevant state. Just agricultural, no one lives there. She's been promoting her upcoming book recently on social media. She posted an anecdote from the book where she talks about killing her dog 20 years ago. She mentions the fact that she murdered her dog because the dog was apparently horribly trained or something, so she just pulled out a pistol and killed it. There's a few problems with this. Number one, why mention that you murdered your dog when this happened 20 years ago? Like, you already knew it was going to be controversial. And number two, why murder your dog? Because it's your fault that the dog was trained to kill animals, that it was trained to kill your sheep or whatever you mentioned. So why are you mad at the dog when it's your fault for poorly training it? There's another problem with this book because she also mentioned another anecdote from the book where she met Kim Jong-un. So she was in a CBS interview and someone mentioned, did you actually meet Kim Jong-un? And she contradicted it by saying that she didn't actually meet him.
Many
but why
of them
are there
actually,
two specific mentions of meeting Kim Jong-un and talking about him, and a specific memory? I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Did you tell your ghostwriter to write that?
I've specifically have worked on policy for over 30 years. And over that time, I have traveled around the world, and I have met with leaders around the world. And that anecdote, I've asked them to change the content, and it will be removed.
It's a simple question. Did you or did you not meet with Kim Jong-un?
That's the answer that I have for you, is that it will be adjusted, and as soon as I became aware of it, that content was removed.
So this makes me question, is there a ghostwriter behind her book? Is she the one actually making the book, actually writing it? Or is there people behind the scenes making it for her? The Boy Scouts of America recently rebranded. This institution was originally made by a Christian, traditionalist values, but it's been going more secular. Most institutions in the United States, in the world, in Western society, have begun becoming more secular. So they rebranded to becoming Scouting America, the first name change in 114 years. The CEO of Boy Scouts said he's making this change to make the company more profitable, which obviously isn't going to work.
So 114 years, that's how long Boy Scouts of America has been in existence, serving the youth, serving our communities. And we determined what is the future? What is our next century of work as an organization? And we quickly determined that Scouting America, that inclusivity, the ability to work with, we welcome everyone to the Scouting family.
You can't just convince people who hate your ideology, hate what you do, to join you forcefully. When churches hang up pride flags and say, we're all inclusive, we support the gays or whatever, they don't actually expect gays to show up, right? That's just gonna make the people who actually go to church, the traditionalists, the people who believe in the church institution, not gonna go. If you have a gay person on a Sunday, are they gonna go to church? A church which, in its writing, in scripture, talks against homosexuality, right? You have a lot of verses in the Bible that go against being homosexual. The same church which says, we support the gays, we want to allow the gays in. Obviously the gays aren't going to actually go to the church. Instead, they'd rather go to a gay bar. Now let's talk about America's universities. I think you've heard this on the news already, right? A lot of America's universities and colleges, the higher education institutions, are having massive demonstrations for Hamas. Hamas being the terrorist organization attempting to liberate Palestine. Now, I know a lot of people who will just say that they're not supporting Hamas, they're supporting Palestine, but when you have these people chanting that they want to kill the Jews, that they hate the Jewish people, right? When you have absurd shit like that going on in universities, right? Harassing Jewish students. They're not actually doing it because they love the Palestinian people. They're just doing it because they want to hate the Jews. I think this could be an end for America's higher education. A lot of people, don't even want to go to college anymore. People online are learning that you don't need university. Just go to a trade school, or just don't go to school at all. Just make your own money doing NFTs or whatever I truly think that this is one of the major turning points in universities, because they're now just scaring away students who have different perspectives, or students which are from a race or a ethnicity that they dislike. A pastor in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, he talked about his wife's her own life willingly. He talks about this in the church. He's like, guys, I'm so sorry, but my wife, haha.
I'm going to have you stand up, and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can. So y'all can stand to your feet. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced. And it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So.
And it was weird for a few reasons, right? He was just talking happily, talking, and then just randomly brings up, haha, my wife died. That's the first, red flag that people started bringing up. But a lot of people who knew her said that she would never do that. And people were bringing up that maybe he the wife. But that's not actually what happened. She actually did, because there's a 911 report before she actually did it, where she calls the police and says, I'm gonna do it. She even said the location where she did it, right? I think this is kind of a shift in society right now, that people will just automatically jump to conspiracies, just say random shit that they think could be true, could be possible, even though it's not. Next off, we're going to talk about a presidential candidate. It's not Trump, it's not Biden, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In a Wednesday interview on the Sage Steele show, he said that he supports full-term abortion up until birth. He also said that a state should have no jurisdiction on abortion.
Keeping it as is, with Roe versus Wade having been overturned, and leaving it up to the states to determine if and when a woman can have an abortion?
No, I wouldn't leave it to the states.
You wouldn't, right?
No, I would.
You would say completely, it's up to the
my
woman.
belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have government involved.
Even if it's full term.
Even if it's full term.
Which, both those statements are shit crazy. Number one, you support abortion all the way up until birth. That's fucking insane. So a baby could be fully developed, fully ready to, pop out of the womb, and you just kill it then? Like, that's fucking crazy to say. Number two, why should the state have no jurisdiction on abortion, which is murder? If a state can't have jurisdiction on murder, on killing people, then can the state make laws? Can the state at all say anything? Arrest people? This is a massive fall off for Robert F. Kennedy for one reason. A lot of conservatives, I think, were planning on voting for him. Those who, hate Trump, or liberals who hate Biden were planning on voting for him. And I think this change is going to push away all the conservatives. So Robert F. Kennedy isn't someone who the conservatives can lean to. He's not an independent. He truly just is a liberal. So Apple recently released an advertisement that's a bit creepy. What the advertisement meant is that you don't need anything, you only need an iPad. And this advertisement is called Crush. It's for the new iPad Pro. You can look it up on their YouTube. So let's just look at it. The ad is it leaves a really creepy feeling after watching it. It's essentially saying that you don't need anything in your life, you only need an iPad. That you don't need anything else, you just need that one iPad. That your life is basically nothing without an iPad. Now let's talk about Greta Thunberg, our favorite climate activist. So Eurovision is the European Song Contest, right? Happens every year. I think it's even twice a year, right? There's the adult one, and then there's the children's one, the youth one. Anyway, Eurovision, right? Singing contest. Sweden won last Eurovision, so now the Eurovision's happening in their country. And if you know anything about Sweden, they have a lot of immigration, right? They're very pro-immigration. Sweden has a massive Muslim population, just like France has. And so Israel is a part of Eurovision. I think the weird part about Eurovision is that a lot of non-European countries are a part of it. Like Australians, Georgia, Armenia. There's a lot of countries that aren't even on the European continent but are still involved with the contest. As I was saying, right, you have an Israeli singer in Eurovision. And then you have this country that's a lot really pro-Arab, pro-Palestine. And you have Greta Thunberg, which is a climate activist who's gone pro-Palestine, right? Essentially talking about that we need to free the Palestinians and that we should hate Israel. Now, I think you can have your own opinions on Israel, own opinions on Palestine, but when it comes to just attacking someone for being Jewish, that's a bit insane. So you had this Israeli singer, right? In the Eurovision stage, she was singing her song, trying to represent Israel, represent the Jews. And people just started to boo her, like literally hating on her just because she was a Jewish person. Now let's get to the most important topic of today's episode. Here's who I want to pick for the vice presidency of Donald Trump, who I think will honestly get picked. Now, who I'm going to pick might be a bit controversial. I think he might get picked, might not get picked. Out of this entire list of options, he seems like the most possible option, I think. Tim Scott. Now, I'll say why I think it is Tim Scott. He's a quiet guy. He won't interrupt Trump, so Trump can be the yapper. He could be the spotlight. Number two, I think he's pro-Trump enough to not get in Trump's way. Like, he was earlier trying to oppose him in the election, but I think now he could be a good option. That's kind of why I think that. For sure, Vivek is not getting picked. Like, it's a dream. It's the dream option. It's what everyone wants, but it's so unlikely. And I also think that Trump is gonna pick someone from a state that isn't radically conservative, because then that could help him win a state which is less likely to win. That's why I think he'd pick Tim Scott, because he's from South Carolina, which is, they vote Democrat sometimes, Republican sometimes, right? It's kind of a swing state. But that's about it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, you know what to do. I'm also just gonna start posting this on Spotify if you want the audio only version. So if you like it on Spotify, I think you follow or something, so follow on there. And I'll see you all next time.